Tanzania is like a kaleidoscope. Whichever way you look at it, you are certain to gain a new perspective. From the ice-capped Kilimanjaro to the wildlife-rich Serengeti, the turquoise waters of tropical islands to the fuming crater of a volcano, this country is fascinatingly diverse. 5 weeks, 4,500 kilometers and countless natural delights. This is our journey through Tanzania. This travel documentary was produced in collaboration with ZAFS Tours, Safari Masters and Miracle Experience. Our adventure began in the foothills of Tanzania's mightiest summit. With 5,895 meters, Kilimanjaro is the glacier-crowned king of African mountains. Since it was first climbed in 1889, this dormant stratovolcano has lured myriad hikers on unforgettable expeditions. We have just set out towards the highest peak of Africa, Kilimanjaro, and we're starting from the western side of the mountain, following the so-called Lemosho route. The reason why we picked this route is that it is 8 days long, and that gives us a lot of time to acclimatize to the altitude, because after all, Kilimanjaro is almost 6,000 meters high. And that means that, sure, there can be symptoms of altitude sickness, but by taking it slowly and steadily, we hope to avoid these, and then, ideally, in 6 days' time, stand on the highest peak of Africa. But before we could even dream of arriving there, we still had a long way to go. Ascending Kilimanjaro is anything but a sprint. An often repeated mantra on the mountain is pole pole, which is Swahili for slowly, slowly. From the beginning, our guides Alex and Laurian established a moderate pace of walking. The idea behind this is to avoid overexertion, especially once the air gets thinner. Initially, this slow progress was somewhat confusing, but on the plus side, it allowed us to soak in the lush scenery. Within minutes, we discovered our first black and white colobri. Also known as mantled gurazas, these monkeys sport a striking fringe of white fur. Blue monkeys, on the other hand, are a bit harder to spot. This is because their dark coat blends in very well with the canopy. Less than 3 hours after setting out, we arrived at the first camp. Here, our support crew had already put up the tents. Before we went to bed that night, it was time for our first health check. This was done twice daily to monitor for any symptoms of altitude sickness.
No, nothing.
The next morning, we headed out early. What a beautiful morning here on our second day of the trail. Birds are singing, sun is out, there's a bit of a wind, but generally conditions are absolutely perfect, and really looking forward to explore more of this beautiful forest. The surrounding landscape was even more captivating than before. Wherever we looked, wind-tousled old man's beard adorned the trees. Despite their appearance, these lichens are not plants, but instead belong to the kingdom of fungi. Their presence is a reliable indicator of clean air, as they only thrive in unpolluted environments. Luckily, they are not affected by noise pollution. During the dry season, Kilimanjaro is rarely quiet. Every day, hundreds of people climb the mountain, which inevitably leads to congestion. Some hours of steep uphill later, we arrived at camp, where we caught our first proper glimpse of the mountain. And then it was finally time to meet the team. There is no doubt that both guides and porters are the backbone of almost every successful ascent. Frankly, a majority of hikers would be incapable of carrying the heavy gear themselves. But aside from doing most of the hard lifting, taking care of tents, food and toilets, the crew also showed us their musical talents.
Kilimanjaro, 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 mlima mrefu sana. Kilimanjaro, anainuka huyo, anaona huyo, ukimuona anainama huyo, anainuka huyo, anaona huyo, ngeni kule, anaruka kila boxa. Ukimuona anainama huyo, anainuka huyo, anaona huyo, nzuri sana. Wageni wakaribishwa Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata, hakuna matata, hakuna matata, hakuna matata.
The third day on the Lemosha route is truly the perfect day for acclimatization, because today we have about 10 kilometers of walking, but we only have 250 meters of elevation gain. And that of course is ideal to get used to the thinner air here at 3,500 meters. So far none of us are battling with really any symptoms of altitude sickness. The only little sign we have noticed is that we are sleeping quite poorly, but then it gets cold at night, we are sleeping in a tent and we are quite high up, so that is to be expected. But right now the weather conditions absolutely perfect. That Kilimanjaro to our left, beautiful moorland to our right, and we've taken a little side trail that none of the other groups have taken, so right now it is just the 5 of us surrounded by this magnificent nature. The main goal of our side quest was to climb Cathedral Point. This peak reaches a respectable elevation of 3,872 meters. Moreover, it provides a sweeping view in all directions. Compared to the solitude of day 3, the following morning was very busy. A major highlight was coming upon giant groundsels. These unusual plants can be found at elevations up to 4,000 meters, which means they are exposed to both intense sunlight and bitter cold. To survive under such harsh conditions, giant groundsels have developed several adaptations. Aside from producing their very own antifreeze, the plants protect themselves by wrapping dead leaves around the stem. The tallest specimens reach a height of 6 to 9 meters, which indicates that they are at least 100 years old.
In the afternoon, we arrived at the mesmerizingly scenic Barranco camp. In addition to its monumental location, this campsite is the gateway to the Barranco Wall, the only somewhat technical section of the trail. As the path is narrow, steep and requires a little bit of scrambling, traffic jams are guaranteed. Despite the obvious overcrowding, scaling the Barranco Wall is actually a lot of fun. Once we had made it to the top, we enjoyed a sensational view of Kilimanjaro's southern flank. As with most days on the trail, we reached the camp early. This meant that we had plenty of opportunity to nap and read.
Of all the major mountains around the world, Kilimanjaro has a little bit an image of being an easy mountain, and the reason for that is that you don't need any technical climbing skills to get to its summit. All you have to do is walk. But what a lot of people forget is the fact that the mountain is almost 6,000 meters high. And altitude sickness can catch pretty much everyone. Yesterday alone we saw the emergency helicopter fly 7 round trips. Also, one of our own crew had to descend because he had headache that wouldn't go away. And today alongside the trail we saw another porter who was holding his stomach because he had intense stomach cramps. Luckily Anna had all the right medication to help him, but yeah, it can catch absolutely everyone. And so if you think about coming to Kilimanjaro, you absolutely must not underestimate this mountain. Choose the route wisely. The more time you give yourself, the higher the chances of success.
On day 6, we followed the marching tide of hikers once again, before arriving at our last camp before the summit. One final health check confirmed we were doing fine, and so we soon snuggled up in our sleeping bags.
Good morning. It is just past 3 a.m. and we have started out towards Uhuru Peak, the highest point of Kilimanjaro. Now we have about 5 kilometers and 1,200 meters of elevation gain ahead of us to get to the summit. And we have started at 3 a.m., which is much later than most groups, which start at 12. Because our reason for that is psychologically it seems easier to just walk 3 hours in the dark instead of 6. The weather is pretty good. We have almost a full moon. It's not that cold, maybe freezing or -1. So we're all doing good. And now it is pole until we have made it to the summit.
Step by step, we fought against the numbing embrace of darkness, slowly climbing ever higher. After an hour, the wind picked up and the temperature suddenly plummeted. Needless to say, we were ecstatic upon seeing the first signs of the rising sun. Strictly following the pace of our guides, each stride brought us closer to the top. By the time we reached Stella Point, most groups were already descending. Luckily, this had been our plan from the outset. Now, all it took was one final push along the crater rim.
I'm getting really emotional here because for the last 1 to 2 hours. Anna has been fighting, really fighting, to make her way up here. Needed many breaks, drinking water, resting, but she kept on pushing, and now the signboard, Uhuru Peak, is 100 meters in front of us. Both of us have made it, and I could not be prouder of her.
Having soaked in the atmosphere and marveled abundantly at the glaciers, it was time for the long way down. Of course, our plans for Tanzania involved much more than climbing Kilimanjaro. But to properly explore the country, we were in need of a sturdy 4x4.
So as you can see, this one right here, so the room is plenty enough for 2 people. And you can sleep very comfortably.
Following a thorough introduction to the vehicle, we were soon swallowed by the traffic in Arusha. Instead of lingering in the city though, we immediately headed southwest. A couple of hours later, we arrived in Tarangire National Park. This reserve is characterized by a mix of savanna, woodlands and seasonally flooded grasslands. One tree in particular dominates the scenery. Baobabs, which are also called the Tree of Life, are a symbol of resilience and the source of much African folklore. In addition to that, their fruits and bark provide important nutrition for many species. Among these, elephants have the biggest impact. These grey giants have stripped many a baobab bare. Most of the time though, they feed on grasses and bushes. The African bush elephant is the largest land mammal on Earth. The fully grown adult easily reaches a shoulder height of 3 meters and a body mass of 6 tons. To achieve such enormous proportions, these animals have to consume 150 kilograms of vegetation every single day. For that, they rely on one of the most versatile tools in the animal kingdom. An elephant's trunk is incredibly intriguing. This elongated appendage is used for anything from communicating to drinking, feeding, or spraying mud on their backs. Equipped with more than 40,000 muscles, the trunk is not only strong, but also highly flexible. This allows elephants to access food sources both on the ground and high up in trees. Naturally, Tarangire is equally home to many other species. In addition to mammals, the park is also a hotspot for birdwatching. The title for the most striking bird undoubtedly goes to the grey-crowned crane. These beautiful creatures inhabit both savannas and marshlands, where they feed on anything from plants to insects and even fish. Much less attractive is nature's cleanup crew. But despite their somewhat repulsive appearance, vultures play a fundamental role in ecosystem health. These scavengers quickly dispose of rotting carcasses, which prevents the spread of lethal pathogens.
In most self-drive safari vehicles, the view of the animals is pretty much limited to a sitting position. The only exception would be if you climb on the roof. However, in this vehicle we have the absolute luxury of simply standing up, which then gives us an elevated perspective of the wildlife surrounding us, and that is especially useful for smaller animals hiding in tall grass.
One of the species we spotted that way was the Kirkstickdig. These tiny antelopes are fairly elusive and often hide in dense vegetation. Interestingly, dik-diks do not rely on drinking. Instead, they quench all their water needs by feeding on leaves, shoots and fruits. Similar to other national parks in Tanzania, Tarangire is crisscrossed by a network of bumpy trails. The area around the main gate certainly gets busy, but the other parts of the reserve are virtually empty. As a result, we got to enjoy most sightings by ourselves. In particular, we were delighted to come upon multiple smaller species. Some of these, such as dwarf mongooses, are very shy. The larger banded mongoose, on the other hand, is not quite as skittish. These gregarious mammals live in colonies of up to 75 animals. Each morning they jointly set out to forage. In our case, the entire group was raiding a termite hill. Meanwhile, a nearby leopard tortoise remained entirely unfazed. Eggs and hatchlings of this reptile are often preyed upon, but a fully grown adult has few natural predators. While Tarangire is still somewhat of a secret, the same cannot be said for Ngorongoro. This conservation area in the north of the country is among the most famous safari destinations globally. Fringed by up to 600-meter high walls, the crater floor boasts one of the world's highest concentrations of wildlife. Strictly speaking, Ngorongoro Crater is not a crater but a caldera. Craters are small, bowl-shaped depressions created by volcanic eruptions, whereas a caldera is a huge, cauldron-like sinkhole formed by the collapse of an emptied magma chamber. Saying that, most people don't come here for a lesson in geology, but to see Africa's megafauna. Within minutes, we were surrounded by hundreds of wildebeest. According to estimates, more than 7,000 of these animals live within the caldera. Most of them stay year-round, but roughly 20% leave in the rainy season. Similarly, around half of the 4,000 Grand zebras are permanent residents. Both species are known to mingle, as larger numbers provide protection from predators. In the early morning, all ungulates are feeding. As soon as the sun reaches its zenith, though, they are much more occupied with wagging their tails or taking a dust bath. Nonetheless, they have to remain vigilant, as predators are never far away. Over 50 lions prowl through the crater at any given time. Far from being the sole realm of mammals, Ngorongoro also supports a diverse avian population. By far the biggest of these birds is the ostrich. Flamingos, however, are much more numerous. Flocks of lesser flamingos migrate to the alkaline Lake Magadi between November and April. Here they find their favorite algae in rich supply. Often hundreds of these rose-colored birds can be seen wading through the shallow water. Of course, they share this habitat with other species, ranging from their close relative, the greater flamingo, all the way to the massive hippopotamus. Such a wealth of wildlife, of course, attracts a flood of visitors. As a result, Ngorongoro can get very crowded. Fortunately, as self-drivers, we could decide where we wanted to go, so we often drove where few others went. Other than savanna and lakes, the caldera is also home to a small forest. This type of landscape provides animals with more shelter and offers the best chances of spotting a leopard. All of a sudden, a traffic jam formed ahead of us. The reason for this commotion was not a leopard though, but another feline resting in a tree. After a full day of incredible animal sightings, it was time to move on. Our subsequent journey led us west through the remainder of the Ngorongoro Conservation Area. Despite its diverse wildlife, this reserve is still inhabited by humans. Specifically, the Maasai, a pastoralist tribe, used the area for grazing their cattle. This people group migrated to northern Tanzania in the 17th and 18th centuries. However, in the 1950s, they were forcefully evicted from the newly established Serengeti National Park and moved further east. In the past, the Maasai lived more or less harmoniously with nature. That being said, they are equally well known for their lion hunts, as killing this apex predator is considered the ultimate show of bravery. Therefore, their continued presence in an area equally designated for wildlife conservation remains a topic of contention. Leaving the Maasai villages behind, we headed deeper into the Serengeti. Contrary to popular belief, the Serengeti is not limited to the eponymous national park. Instead, this geographical region also includes neighboring game reserves. Due to its large size, habitats range from riparian forests to swamps and woodlands. However, what the Serengeti is most famous for is its sprawling grasslands. This vast expanse of unspoiled wilderness is the setting for one of nature's most incredible spectacles. Each year, hundreds of thousands of zebras, gazelles and wildebeest embark on a circular trek known as the Great Migration. The primary reason for them to venture on this 800-kilometer-long journey is the search for fresh grass. From January to March, most of the animals are in the southern Serengeti in an area known as Ndutu. Seeing all this wildlife from the ground level was already impressive. However, the next morning we gained an entirely new perspective. First time in our lives, we took to the sky in a hot air balloon. This form of aerial locomotion works by burning liquid propane inside a large balloon. Has a lower density than the cold air outside, which makes the entire contraption buoyant. Unlike most other aircraft, hot air balloons cannot be steered. The only way to achieve directional control is by utilizing wind streams at different altitudes.
This if interest demand is on 6,000 is too far.
Good morning!
Once we reached the open savanna, we discovered our first antelopes. Soon after, the landscape changed again. Gliding just meters above the canopy, we could almost touch the treetops. In comparison to that, the view from far up was phenomenal. Gazing down, the number of wildebeest kept on growing, until eventually we could make out hundreds of animals. And then, after an hour of soaring above the Serengeti, it was time to descend. Slowly approaching the ground, favorable winds and an experienced captain made for a gentle landing.
Here we go, guys. Are you ready? Count down with me. 3, 2, 1. Touchdown. Hold down. Perfect, guys. Welcome back down. That's the air is released. And in combination with stuff.
Our time in Ndutu was not yet over though. In fact, one highlight was about to chase another. To our complete surprise, we came upon a cheetah. But this was not just any cheetah. It was a mother of 4 cubs. Cheetahs are the fastest land animals on Earth. In full pursuit, they can achieve a top speed upwards of 100 kilometers an hour. Despite their agility, these felines are vulnerable to other carnivores. That is why male cheetahs sometimes form coalitions. That way they can better defend themselves and take down bigger prey. The threat of other predators particularly affects cubs. Luckily, these playful youngsters were blissfully unaware of that.
We are beyond excited right now because we've just got the hot tip from another driver that there's a leopard somewhere in a tree area over there. So we're just trying to make our way there as fast as possible. And I think I can already see the first safari car. So fingers crossed we're going to see our first leopard today.
Resting in the shadow of an acacia tree, this female leopard was grooming herself. Just as we were heading to camp, we also came upon a pride of lions. Little did we know that this was not the last we would see of them.
This has turned into a really intense evening because we have set up camp on a special campsite, which means we are surrounded by wilderness and a lot of animals. As a matter of fact, just when we set up camp, there were 2 hyenas walking past. And this gave us the idea of putting up a tripod with a wildlife camera that captures any type of movement that would happen throughout the night. Now we're already in the tent and we heard a really weird sound, like a crashing noise. So I decided to take a flashlight and look outside, and in that very moment there were 2 lionesses walking past, maybe 10-15 meters. And also our tripod and camera are gone. So of course we are not going outside now to check on it. We're going to give the lionesses a couple of minutes to pass, but hopefully, fingers crossed, it's still somewhere to be found.
20 minutes later I went out to have a look, but neither the tripod nor the camera were anywhere to be seen. The following morning we had more luck.
Batteries are out, so they completely ripped it apart. Tripod. So the camera was attached here. Let's see if we can find the camera somewhere. Success! We have returned in the light, and now we have located the camera. There are a couple of batteries missing, but at least we got the camera back. So we've recovered the camera, and there are definitely some damages to it. We don't yet know if it will turn on again. It didn't work a minute ago, but we are really excited to see if there are any files on the little SD card. So we're going to plug it into the laptop and have a look.
At first the camera recorded as intended, although nothing much happened. Then it captured an image of the culprit. This was followed by another picture and finally an ear before the camera shut off forever. Saying farewell to Ndutu, we headed deeper into the vastness of the Serengeti. Along the way, the road was often in a dismal state. The reason for that is not only the hundreds of safari vehicles, but also the natural effects of the seasons. Every year between November and December, and again between March and May, dark clouds form on the horizon. Once they arrive, it can rain for days. But even in the dry season, the remains of waterholes pose a fun challenge. Cruising around the central Serengeti, it was noticeable how few wildebeest there were. We did discover plenty of other species though. Of course, with so many herbivores grazing in the open, predators are never far away. Lions in particular are a common sight. Around 3,000 of these formidable apex predators roam the Serengeti. Another, albeit much smaller feline prowling the grasslands is the serval. One of our favorite sightings was when we came upon a herd of elephants. The newest member of the group was heart-meltingly adorable. All day we followed remote trails through the picturesque landscape. Surprisingly, we barely encountered any other vehicles. Having completed our exploration of the Serengeti, the plan was to drive a loop through northern Tanzania. Following several hours of what locals jokingly call African massage, we beheld our intended destination.
Good morning, or rather good night, for it is 1:45 in the morning. The reason I'm up at this ungodly hour is, ironically, to climb the Mountain of God, the only active volcano in Tanzania. And this hike is often described as the toughest day hike in East Africa because it involves 2,000 meters of elevation gain almost, and all of that is done in the dark to avoid the intense daytime heat. So for the next 3 to 4 hours, it's just my guide, me and my headlamp, climbing through the dark and then hopefully catching a beautiful sunrise.
Walking in the dark was almost meditative, as there weren't any visual distractions. Nonetheless, this was a strenuous hike. The reward for all the effort arrived 4 hours later, when the first light of day illuminated the countryside. In the distance, both Kilimanjaro and Mount Meru rose above the clouds. My main reason for braving this steep ascent was another one though. Doinyo Lengai is an active stratovolcano that has spewed ash multiple times in the past 100 years. The last major eruption occurred in 2008. Since then, chimney-like lava towers have formed on the crater floor. Most remarkably is that this volcano produces a low viscosity nitrocarbonatite. That means that its lava is only about half as hot as regular silicate melts. In fact, the temperature is so low that the lava appears black in daylight. Saying that, it still reaches 500 degrees Celsius, so you want to avoid touching it. The last part of our extended trip through Tanzania's north was a visit to Lake Manyara National Park. This reserve is named for an alkaline lake that provides a habitat for countless animals. Lake Manyara National Park is home to many large mammals. However, its main appeal is monkeys. One of the most common species is the vervet monkey. These clever animals can often be seen foraging. Compared to that, olive baboons are much bigger. These primates live in family groups that can number 150 individuals. As opportunistic omnivores, they will eat just about anything. This explains why, as a species, they are widely successful across habitats. The rank of a female in the group is mostly hereditary, but males must establish dominance through competition. It is therefore no surprise that juveniles constantly spar with one another. The third type of primate we saw was the blue monkey. Unlike baboons, these animals spend most of their time in the canopy. Despite their name, blue monkeys are mostly grey and black. Especially remarkable are their large auburn eyes. Blue monkeys only survive in shady forests with plenty of water. There, they feed on a varied diet of fruits, insects and leaves. Alerted by their loud calls, we also spotted silvery-cheeked hornbills. Driving south, the forest gradually opened up. Additionally, we came upon a fun water crossing. In the evening, we set up camp under some acacia trees, preparing for a long drive ahead. The next part of our road trip led us 1,000 kilometers southwest. Along the way, the scenery was mostly dominated by agriculture. Our biggest excitement was saving a chameleon from being run over. Most of the time, the roads were in excellent condition. This only changed once we passed through Katavi National Park. In the dry season, this reserve offers excellent wildlife sightings. Moreover, you are guaranteed to be virtually alone, as fewer people visit Katavi in a year than the Serengeti in a day. Another 300 kilometers south, we arrived on the shore of Lake Tanganyika. This gigantic body of water is the 6th largest and 2nd deepest lake on Earth. In total, it stretches nearly 700 kilometers from north to south. According to research, it is also the world's richest freshwater ecosystem. Continuing on a small trail past several villages, we drove all the way to the border with Zambia. Our reason to venture this far off the popular tourist path was to visit a little-known gem. The roaring Kalambo Falls drop down a total of 235 meters. With such a height, they are among the tallest single-drop waterfalls in Africa. Not only had an impressive view of the water, but also of a verdant gorge. However, the best vista opened up from further down. Here, the waterfall could be seen in all its tempestuous glory. Whereas we had barely encountered any traffic in the west of the country, this was soon about to change.
Driving through Tunduma is like a video game really, because there's cows on the side of the road, hundreds of trucks, there's tuk-tuks overtaking the trucks, motorbikes overtaking the tuk-tuks, cars overtaking everyone else. The road is in a really bad condition, but frankly, I really like this type of chaos.
The line of trucks waiting at the border crossing to Zambia was at least 8 kilometers long. Luckily, there was almost zero traffic on the bumpy trail to Ruaha National Park. Following a strenuous day of driving, we set up camp on a peaceful site where Anna prepared a healthy dinner. Morning, we entered the park through the main gate. The lifeline of the park is the Ruaha River. This perennial stream attracts many animals, especially in the dry season. In our case, however, recent rains had turned the entire landscape into a lush green. Consequently, many of the smaller trails were properly overgrown. Dense vegetation makes it much harder to spot wildlife. Nonetheless, we still had wonderful sightings. Aside from a large elephant population, Ruaha is also known for another chubby mammal. At several points along the river, pods of hippos inhabit shallow pools. Well, nigh everything about this animal is confusing. For starters, hippopotamuses spend most of their lives in water, yet they are unable to float and are average swimmers at best. Furthermore, they have absolutely massive teeth, even though they solely feed on grasses. Lastly, they are ill-tempered loners on land, but as soon as they are in water, they congregate in large numbers. Of course, there are good reasons for all these adaptations. Water helps them to stay cool, their teeth are used to assert dominance, and pods provide communal protection for their young. One of the hippo's most intriguing behaviors is dung showering. Both males and females use the strategy of spraying their feces to communicate with potential rivals. During the rainy season, there's plenty of space for each hippo. However, as the dry season progresses, water levels drop. It is then that it gets very crowded. Always following the course of the river, we drove far into the park. Eventually, we arrived at a magnificent viewpoint. Within less than 30 minutes, we witnessed not only elephants, but even a cheetah crossing the shallow water. Pushing on deeper into the bush, the trail suddenly became muddy. A little too muddy, in fact.
This has turned into a bit of a dicey situation here because it seems that we are completely bogged down. All day long we've been cruising along these trails, and of course we drove through several mud holes, no problem at all with four-wheel drive engaged. But this particular point here, the surface layer appeared to be dry, but underneath there was at least 30 centimeters of wet mud, and within just 3 or 4 meters we completely bogged down. The tires on the right side of the car just keep spinning. Four-wheel drive is of course engaged, but there momentarily seems to be no way forward or backwards. So we decided to try to dig ourselves out as much as we can and then maybe collect some branches to gain some traction with the rear tire, all the while being aware that this is also the habitat of lions, leopards and cheetahs. Also, the sun is blisteringly hot. So yeah, the joys of a self-drive safari. Clearly not the first one that needed support here. Okay, so that first attempt clearly didn't work. Both tires just kept on spinning mercilessly, but we are not panicking. And there are several reasons for that. A, we have a local SIM card, so in theory we could call someone for help. B, we have a UHF radio in the car, which is also great because we can contact the park rangers and in theory they can send someone to pull us out. But also we still have some ideas how to get out ourselves, which is our priority. The sticks and stones didn't really work because there's just too much wet mud, but what we had an idea for is collecting a lot of the dry mud that is lying around here and placing it behind the tires, so to create more traction once again. And also, we still haven't lowered the tire pressures yet, which probably is a good idea, what we should do. And of course, as a last resort, we still have this big boy here, high lift jack, possibly to lift up the rear tire a bit and then place more underneath. But for the moment, dry mud it is. Let's see if it works. Dry mud for the win!
In the end, it had taken us an hour to free ourselves, so naturally we were a little exhausted. To wind down, we put up camp directly above the river. Listening to the crackling of a fire and the noises of the night was immensely soothing. Well, at least until a lion began to roar nearby. Bidding farewell to Ruaha, our further road trip led us northeast. Along the way, we visited Isimila, a site with eroded sandstone formations. But as temperatures were mercilessly rising in the lowlands, we soon escaped into the Usambara Mountains. This range is known for its year-round pleasant climate. In the past, much of the region was covered in forests. That being said, a growing population and ruthless timber companies have led to alarming deforestation. Today, locals mostly rely on subsistence farming on steep terraces. But even more than its produce, the region is known for its chameleons. The West Usambara two-horned chameleon, for example, can only be found here. With the road trip section of our journey coming to an end, we ventured onto one more trail. Sometime later, we arrived at Kikuletwa Hot Springs. This natural swimming hole entices with incredibly clear water that has a temperature of around 27 degrees Celsius. During the day, hundreds of locals and visitors throng the pool. However, early in the morning, we had the site almost to ourselves. And then we put down our rooftop tent one last time. Our journey for Tanzania wasn't quite over yet though. Aside from its wildlife-rich national parks and glacier-capped Kilimanjaro, the country is also famous for its tropical islands. The most popular of these is Unguja, which is commonly referred to as Zanzibar. Mafia, instead, is a lesser-known island to the south. With sandy beaches, palm trees swaying in the wind, and boats gently riding on the waves, this was the perfect place to unwind. Nevertheless, relaxation wasn't the only reason we had come here. At certain times of the year, the waters around Mafia are teeming with plankton. This richly laid table also attracts the largest fish in the world, the whale shark. In the past, they could be seen from October to February, but in recent years, their migration pattern has changed. Despite cruising around for multiple hours, the only thing we saw was water. Fortunately, there was plenty to see below the surface. The waters surrounding the island are known for their pristine coral reefs. So far, 50 types of coral and 460 species of fish have been identified. Spending our last day immersed in this magical underwater world was the perfect ending to a memorable trip. After 5 weeks, having driven 4,500 kilometers and explored Tanzania by land, water and air, it was time to say goodbye. For almost 70 years, the phrase "Serengeti shall not die" has been the most powerful mantra of nature conservation. From summit to savanna to sea, Tanzania's national parks are more than just dots on a map. They are vibrant reminders of the raw beauty of our planet. And they are a testament that the wild matters, that wonder still exists, and that some places simply must endure.